Confess.
The word fell from Alpha Kael's lips like a stone dropped into still water, quiet, certain, and devastating in the ripples it made. Ceres Vale did not flinch. She knelt in the center of the pack's circle, palms pressed into snow that had gone red beneath her, the blood moon hanging swollen and ancient overhead. 40 warriors surrounded her in perfect silence, claws flexed, eyes glowing amber. Their breath rose in slow, synchronized clouds, and not one of them moved, not one of them spoke. At the edge of the circle, Luna Liana clutched her newborn son to her chest and tried to remember how to breathe. Kael stepped closer to Ceres, 6 feet of barely restrained power, his wolf pressing visibly against his skin. She could see it in the locked tension of his jaw, the slow curl and uncurl of his fingers. He had known this woman his entire life, trusted her with everything he valued. That was what made his stillness so terrifying. Ceres lifted her chin, blood on her hands, snow in her hair, and on her lips, something that wasn't quite a smile and wasn't quite surrender.
I only did what the moon was too weak to do.
Welcome to Monet's Romance Library.
The entire pack inhaled at once. Lyanna's arms pulled her son tighter against her chest, and she felt the mate bond between herself and Kael vibrate like a wire pulled to breaking, fear traveling down it, or grief, or fury. She wasn't no longer tell the difference. She wasn't sure it mattered. Everyone in that circle knew what Ceres had done. What none of them understood yet was why. 3 hours earlier, Lyanna had awoken to silence, not the soft, breathing quiet of a sleeping infant. This was the silence of absence, a hollow so loud it pulled her upright before her eyes were fully open. The crib was empty. She stood over it for 3 full seconds, her mind refusing what her body already knew. No scent of rogues, no disturbed wards, no broken entry. The room was exactly as she had left it at midnight, except for the single thing lying on the floor beside the crib's wooden leg. A silver bracelet. Ceres's bracelet, the one their dying mother had pressed into her older sister's hand on the day Lyanna had been chosen as the Alpha's mate. "Keep her safe," the old woman had whispered. "She will need you more than she knows." Ceres appeared in the doorway moments later, breathless, eyes wide with horror.
Rogues. I heard them crossing the wards. I chased them to the river, but they were already...
She stopped, saw the empty crib, made a sound Lyanna had never heard from her before, something between a sob and a howl. She wept harder than the mother did. She screamed Kael's name into the dark until her voice cracked raw. She grabbed Lyanna's face and pressed their foreheads together and shook. Too desperate, something in Lyanna's chest whispered. Too precise. She buried it. This was Ceres, her shadow, her protector, the first person who had ever made her feel safe in a world built for wolves stronger than her. Kael's trackers found nothing, no scent trail, no disturbance beyond the southern tree line. The night had swallowed the air as if he had never existed. At dawn, a howl rose from the southern border. The trackers returned with faces carrying something beyond shock, the particular expression of men who had witnessed the impossible and had not yet found words for it. The child was alive, found miles downstream, cradled impossibly in the arms of Darius Thorn, an exiled wolf, cast out 3 years prior on charges of treason that had never quite been proven. He knelt before Kael, with the infant pressed carefully to his chest, and spoke with the careful stillness of a man who knew his life balanced on a single breath.
The current slowed around him, like it was commanded.
The blood moon's last light caught the infant's skin, and there, pulsing over his small chest, a silver crescent birthmark, burning like a second moon pressed into flesh. Divine Alpha lineage, the sign the elders had spoken of for generations. The moon had not merely let this child survive, she had claimed him. Kael took his son from the exile's arms with a tenderness that cracked Lyanna open to look at. He pressed the infant to his throat, let the child breathe in his scent, Alpha calm, steady, home, and when he raised his eyes to find Ceres across the clearing, every trace of that tenderness was gone. Ceres had gone very still, because she knew something in that moment that no one else did. She hadn't placed the child in that river to kill him. She had chosen that specific bend, that current, that bank, because she had believed with complete and loving conviction that it would save him. She had not expected to be so catastrophically wrong. The full assembly gathered that night. The blood moon rose again, heavier, closer, as if the sky itself had leaned down to witness. The trial circle formed in the old way. No torches, no ceremony beyond the crushing weight of 40 witnesses and one truth that had not yet been spoken. Kael stood across from Ceres and asked only,
Why?
No alpha command in it, no dominance, only the bewilderment of a man who had trusted this woman with the most sacred thing in his world, and now stood in the rubble of that trust, trying to understand how he had gotten here. Ceres closed her eyes.
Because the prophecy was never meant for him.
The murmur that moved through the pack was 40 people simultaneously reconsidering everything. Elder Rowan stepped forward, old enough that wolves twice his size instinctively quieted when he moved, and the look on his face was not surprise. It was the look of a man watching a fire he had accidentally started finally reach the house. Years before the mating ceremony, before the pregnancy, he had come to Ceres alone. He had shared words he gave to no one else, believing that she would carry them with wisdom. The firstborn of nightfall will bring ruin before rebirth. She had carried them, had turned them over every sleepless night for months, examined them from every angle, and arrived with an iron certainty of someone who loves too completely to think clearly. If the heir never rose, ruin could not follow. She had been protecting the pack. She had been protecting Kael. She had been trying to protect Lyanna most of all. And then she saw the birthmark glowing at the river's edge and understood too late, far too late, that she had not prevented anything. She had only ensured it. What happened next no one had prepared for. Ceres laughed, broken and wild, the sound of a woman watching the architecture of her love collapse into rubble. She pointed, not at the infant, not at Kael, at Lyanna. Her voice trembled with something that lived between accusation and grief.
It isn't him. It's her.
The silence that descended was absolute. Even the wind stopped, as if the night wanted to hear this clearly. Kael turned to his mate, and in his golden eyes that had held nothing but certainty for 3 years, Lyanna watched the first crack appear. Small, involuntary. He couldn't prevent it, and she couldn't unsee it.
On the night she conceived, the moon never rose.
An eclipse. Rare, ancient, ominous beyond the words the pack had for it. Lyanna's breath locked in her chest, because it was true. That night the sky was total and black, and she had lain awake after Kael slept, heart and heard something she had never told him. Not the warm, silver-edged presence of the moon goddess the pack knew and prayed to. Something older, something that lived in the dark below the dark, a voice that pressed against the inside of her ribs like a second heartbeat. She had told herself it was exhaustion. She had buried it, afraid that if Kael ever knew, he would look at her exactly the way he was looking at her now. He took one step back, one small, unconscious step. She felt it move through the mate bond like a blade finding the precise gap between ribs. Not a wound that bled. Worse, a wound that simply opened and stayed open.
Elder Roan raised his staff.
You misheard me,
He said to Ceres, quietly, without cruelty, which somehow made it worse. He turned to the circle and let the words land like stones.
The prophecy does not say the Luna destroys the Alpha line. It says the Alpha line will be reborn through betrayal.
The child had to touch death, cross the river, be claimed by the current, and returned, twice blessed, twice chosen, marked by something no Alpha before him had ever carried. Ceres had never been the savior. She had been the instrument. The ruin was never the heir. It was this, the fracture in the center of the circle. The mate bond strained, the foundation cracked just enough to let something new force its way through.
Trial by moonlight.
Kael's voice was very quiet when he said it. Ceres shifted, bones cracked and reformed, but only halfway. Fur rippled across her shoulders and stopped. Her face half transformed and held there, half wolf, half woman, caught between what she had chosen and what she had meant to choose. The moon did not reject her. She reflected her. Her punishment was not death. Death would have been mercy. She would live beyond the border, fractured, belonging nowhere, a living testament to what divided love costs when it mistakes itself for wisdom. As the warriors moved to take her, she found Lyanna's eyes across the circle one final time.
If ruin comes, remember, I tried.
Lyanna could not speak. She looked down her son instead, at the crescent mark still burning silver above his heart. The infant opened his eyes. They were not silver. They were gold, brighter than Kael, brighter than any Alpha the pack's long memory had ever held. Kael lowered himself to one knee before his mate. Not in authority, not in performance, in something neither of them had language for. A man who had stepped back from his mate by one unconscious inch, and now had to decide if he could cross the distance that inch had made. He looked up at her, she looked down at him, and the mate bond, cracked, strained, raw at the edges, held its breath between them. Lyanna thought about the eclipse, about the voice she had buried, about every secret she had carried alone because she was afraid of exactly this moment, afraid of being looked at like something uncertain, something dangerous, something other. She was so tired of being afraid. She reached down and pressed her palm against his face. He closed his eyes like a man who had been holding something heavy for a very long time, and had finally been given permission to set it down. The child stirred between them, and when they both looked down, really looked, the crescent mark above his heart was no longer pulsing silver. It was burning gold. Brighter than Kael, brighter than any Alpha the pack's long memory had ever held. The infant opened his mouth and howled. The pack answered, instinctive, unanimous, electric. And somewhere deep beneath the frozen earth, in the dark below every darkness the pack had ever named, something ancient, something patient, something that had been waiting, answered back.